Hello and welcome to the June 1st podcast. My name is Ethan Moriarty, and I'd like to start off by inviting you to check out other places where you can find June 1st content. First off is our YouTube channel, June 1st, with the first spelt out. If you search June 1st in the YouTube search bar, we should be the first channel recommendation. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter, we can be found at June1stWX. Once again, the first is spelt out. And my personal handle on Twitter, @EMoriartyWX. And with that, on to today's guest. Jen Walton is a storm chaser from Colorado, a photographer in both landscapes and storm photography, and the creator of Girls Who Chase. Jen, welcome aboard.
Thank you so much for having me, Ethan.
There's a lot I want to talk to you about today. There's a whole host of things that I want to touch on, but first I really want to start with May 23rd, 2021, where we first met very briefly in a parking lot, waiting for storms to fire to the south. I just wanted to ask if how your day panned out from that perspective, if it was a fruitful outing that day.
It did not pan out, I think, the way any of us had hoped. Because the reason we were all in that parking lot is we were planning to head east to try to capture some sort of isolated supercell we thought we could expect somewhere along the Colorado-Kansas border. But we did get a beautiful sunset, and actually I think there was something that spun up very quickly that we were able to capture with the sunset behind it, but I don't know that I would have necessarily driven to Colorado, Kansas for a sunset. How about you?
Yeah, that was pretty much the same thing for us. We decided to not chase the earlier stuff off the Palmer Divide earlier that day.
Same.
And I think that was probably the prudent choice because from my understanding, it was quite the chaser convergence up that way and a lot of chaser traffic. So not exactly my speed, and I don't want to exactly deal with that.
Yeah, it was also moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. We had quite the high level flow going that day. So we had positioned to kind of wait it out and see if we could see something without actually chasing with it, and then decided to relocate to, put ourselves in a better position for what we thought was going to be round two, I think, but alas.
Yeah, that's storm chasing for you, I guess.
Yeah.
So first off, I want to ask where the interest for weather came from, whether that came from, very early on. I know that there's been the quote out there that has been said that everyone has that switch per se, and it only takes, maybe an event to flip that switch, or it's just a burning passion that we've had all along. So I wonder where your passion originally came from.
It's an interesting question for me and not really a simple answer. I had a passion for the majority of my life. I'd say I grew up watching the Weather Channel. As a 6-year-old plus, my parents would turn on the television and it would inevitably be on the Weather Channel. And what started, I think, as frankly complete fear and terror of thunderstorms, mostly at night. I grew up in the Southeast, so we had a lot that happened, both in Georgia and North Carolina, where I grew up. And there'd be lightning storms at night, and I would end up in my parents' bedroom to try to sleep in there. And then at some point that shifted into just utter fascination. Walking outside to watch weather, eventually learning how to read radar and kind of obsessing over radar. But when it actually came to chasing, I was actually quite the late bloomer. And I've spent some time examining why that is. What took me so long to decide that was something I was capable of doing and to get into. So I think from a history perspective, I was kind of your classic potential chaser, right? With the watching of the Weather Channel and then watching of Twister and getting into things like Storm Chasers and Tornado Road and some of those other shows that everybody had been watching. But it kind of stopped there for me for an extended period of time. And I had a career actually in science and environmental communication, and was always kind of 1 degree removed from people who studied severe weather, people who were into the science of weather and climate. And over time, tried to get to know those people and sort of talk them into taking me with them, or getting into the research, or kind of name dropping to convince someone. And it just kind of got worse and worse. Around 2011 and 2012, my office was down the street from the Boulder Airport, which used to house the Dows, Josh Borman's Dows. And I would drive past them every day and want to drive in and just start talking to people and asking questions. And eventually I actually did. And I almost had Josh talked into taking me with them for a while, but it just never quite panned out. And it just, I don't know. I was always, I think 1 degree removed behind it, never really sort of mentally made the connection that I should actually just start doing that myself. It was more just, I wanted somebody to take me with them, or somebody to teach me how to chase. So there wasn't really a moment per se when it comes to like one particular storm or a life event that made me say, this is it. It was more a life transition where I made a decision that I was going to start putting my energy into the things that I knew really mattered to me. And that's really where my story started. So that was in 2018.
Yeah. And the other thing too about like the idea of like trying to break that barrier into storm chasing too, when we're watching all these shows, they always preface the show with, this is for trained professionals, like don't try this at home, or not like you're going to be having much success from your back porch all the time, but the idea of that this is something for trained professionals. And yes, as chasers, we have to educate ourselves and learn, storm structure, how to read radar representations, and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot that goes into it, but at the same time, with that education, it's very, I don't think it's as tough of a gap to actually bridge as, some of these label warning messages that they preface at the beginning of these shows make it out to be. Obviously, that's probably just because of legalities and stuff like that. But I think it's a lot more accessible than most people really think when it comes to that.
Agree. And that's actually kind of become an important part of my story. I'm not exactly sure what fully precipitated the massive shift in 2018, but a lot of it had to do with deciding that I was going to dedicate more of my time and energy to stuff I loved. I was spending too much of my life working and making money and doing the things that I was supposed to be doing as like adulting, basically. Yeah. Right. And I can't exactly remember the sequence of events, but I had started to follow a bunch of chasers on social media and inadvertently was following some chase tour groups, and someone posted a discount for a chase tour. And I saw the discount, kind of squinted at it and thought, oh, I can't do that. And then kind of caught myself. I don't know if you've ever sort of caught yourself messaging about something and realizing that there's no reason for that to be true. And thought, wait, why can't I? And I was lucky enough to be in a job and a career where a tour was something I could afford, which I know is not the case for a lot of folks. And I thought, okay, well, this is a probably somewhat reasonable way to kind of dip my toe in and get a sense of what it's really like and see if I like it, and not do anything terribly stupid like driving out to a storm by myself without a clue, Yeah. So I went out with a tour in June 2018, and we didn't see much because it was 2018. But I sort of surprised myself, and I think also the tour guides, by the veracity at which I was asking questions and wanting to know why they were going where they were going and how they knew where a storm would form, I mean, one night we were sitting at a gas station and the storm literally formed over the gas station. And I just was blown away by this. So I left with pagefuls of notes and got home and thought, well, I know enough to be dangerous. I think I'm going to give this a try and see how it goes. And 2 weeks later, I actually saw my first tornado by myself about 40 minutes from my home. I was in my pajamas at the time because I was in such a rush to get out of the house because I saw it form just north of me. And I had just learned about the eagle shape, the flying eagle shape, so I knew it had the look. And for some reason, I thought that thing's going to do it. And I want to be there when it does. And I was completely on the wrong side of the storm. It was moving east and I was on the west side, and I got stuck in town somewhere, like got stuck in traffic. Like I made all the rookie mistakes, that you would make that you don't think of when you're on a tour, and crested a hill. And in front of me was the Prospect Valley tornado, June 19th, 2018. And I just have this mental image of jumping up and down outside of my car, screaming in my pajamas, right? Screaming. Yeah. And that was like a monster was born that day.
Yeah. Talk about a first tornado. I think it wasn't that long ago that I think Simon Brewer posted a photo of the Prospect Valley tornado.
Yeah.
And boy, that's quite the first tornado to ring in the, I guess, the beast that is storm chasing and the passion that can lie within.
And I was really lucky too, because I was still on the west side of the storm. And if you look at radar archives of the way that storm moved, it actually moved its circulation almost to the west side. So instead of being hidden by precip RFD, I had a perfectly clear view. So it was just pure luck that day.
That's awesome. Beyond 2018 going into 2019, did you find similar success into your next season? Because I know there's the famous sophomore slump or anything like that, but 2019 was a very profitable season for storm chasers. So I was wondering if it kind of panned out the same way for you.
2019 and 2020 both were big educational years for me, I think. I got lucky in 2019 in that, like, I learned how cams worked and was definitely a much more of a cam chaser, I think, in 2019, convective allowing model. And the models did a pretty good job in 2019 of predicting isolated storms and the like. So I probably made it work mostly because of that. Saw my fair share of supercells, and happened to be roughly 7 to 8 miles south of where the Chugwater tornado occurred, and then got suckered south and missed the whole thing, which I'm still bitter about. So I learned some hard lessons about behavior that day and terrain in Wyoming, and but saw some really epic supercells, and did actually manage to catch the Otis tornado, which was August 11th of that year, with a friend. And it was almost completely rain wrapped. We saw the right side emerge kind of at the last minute. So I did get to see a bunch of land spouts in the Otis tornado that year, but I missed Chugwater and JM, which those were just, I'll call those learning experiences.
Yeah. I mean, that's sometimes what it takes, though, is to, have those misses in order to, catch the next one in the future. And I know personally for me, I always tell myself, there's always going to be another. We left the plains after the 23rd this year because we didn't think the 24th was going to pan out. And sure enough, Selden happened. And I mean, we probably would have been on the Southern Storms anyway, like everyone else. But
same.
I think that's, I think that is a good, you need those misses in order to make yourself a better chaser at the end of the day.
I would say so. I mean, it was it didn't at all discourage me, but I think it was a little bit humbling. And it also just kind of further motivated me to dig into research and learning about forecasting and not relying so much on modeling and more on day-to-day observations and satellite and mesoanalysis and that type of thing. And then I think 2020 just is when I think I really went from kind of a half-assed cam chaser to a chaser, is what I would say, because it was such a wonky year because of the weak flow and the warm mid-levels and all the weird stuff that we were dealing with the ridge over us all season, that I had no choice but to learn the hard way if I actually wanted to see a storm instead of blue sky. So it really forced me to dial in all of those different elements. And then I felt that I was able to kind of piece all of that together and put it to work this year, I'd say, although our season up here near like High Plains season was pretty short, unfortunately.
Yeah. And the other thing is too, is that I think the common misconception going into storm chasing that I think a lot of people suffer from is the fact that, you know, they're expecting tornadoes and their bar is set at tornadoes. And for me personally, and for, I know a lot of chasers, I imagine you included, some supercells alone are incredible. And 2020 being a great example of, you know, the tornado numbers just weren't there, but there were some incredible structure storms that year.
Yes. Agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, I think, too, when I started to also shift from just chasing into storm photography because of that, actually. And also started to hone in on what it was that brought me joy in terms of capturing storms. And it's definitely not just tornadoes. I mean, there's so many cool different elements that you can capture and show people. And I mean, out here, especially in the High Plains, because you have so much that's LP, there's just so many different elements of structure that you can work with, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really when I think the photography piece started to kick in for me as well.
That's awesome. Moving a little bit forward into 2021, I know not long after I left the plains, you saw an incredible tornado in Nebraska. I believe that's Benkelman.
It was.
I hope I'm saying it correctly.
Yep.
And it's funny that you caught that tornado and were mentioning the Dows earlier, because I'm pretty sure the Dows were on that storm and actually were able to get a case study out of it.
Yes.
Which I think is fantastic. But how was that experience this year?
You know, it actually was so we saw 3 tornadoes on Benkelman Day. 2 of them, I believe, were EF0, rated EF0. And then the big one that's in the majority of my photos was rated an EF2. And it really was my first time capturing LP clear air structure tornado since 2018. So that was pretty awesome. But I think the thing for me that really that day did for me was show me that hard work sometimes pays off. Like all the learning and all the different elements that I had kind of struggled through during my 4 years of chasing all kind of came together to keep us north on the warm front instead of, you know, getting suckered south to the dry line bulge, which was really tempting. And actually, when that storm first went up, we were in Ray arguing about whether we should head south to St. Francis. So we were kind of sitting between the warm front and the dry line bulge, just in case we needed to like shoot south very quickly. And we watched that storm go up and said, this is it. So I'm really proud of both of us. I am particularly proud of the fact that we trusted our forecast, I think that can sometimes really mess with people.
Oh yeah.
I had a couple of events happen earlier this season. I missed every tornado in Colorado this year somehow. And most of them, I mean, the only one that I really am upset about was the Pumpkin Center tornadoes, because I had forecasted Lyman that day and then somehow found myself in Akron, and I still can't exactly remember how. But it was just a reminder that to trust your forecast, because
yeah, was that May May 22nd?
It was just a few days before, because I got to tell you, we were so like neither of us could decide whether to stay or go when the storm first went up near Benkelman. Because we weren't trusting ourselves. Like there was all this, well, it seems like the storm and we forecasted it, but we've been wrong a lot this year. And so,
yeah.
So I think it was kind of redemption in a lot of ways. And, getting to see 3 tornadoes in a very short span of time was pretty epic. So.
Yeah. A nice little tornado family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Colorado was interesting to myself. Granted, I was only out there for a couple days this year in Colorado in particular, but May 22nd with that nice, was it needle elephant trunk style, just south of Akron.
Mm-hmm.
That one really, we were on it, but I was not anticipating the storm to go from 0 to 100 as fast as it did. So we were coming from the east from like the Yuma area, got into Akron, and then we were like, oh, this thing's gonna, we got to be 2 steps ahead of this thing. So we blasted north, and next thing you know, we're looking in the rearview mirror and there's a tornado on the ground. And so we're just like, oh, what the heck? We spin the car around and I change out lenses, and the moment I pull my camera up into the viewfinder, I just see it just breaking apart. And I'm just like, well, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah, we were on the west side because it went up so quickly. We got surprised. I think, I thought we had at least another 30 minutes. And then when those storms popped, I saw the boundary and said, oh, we are screwed. We're totally screwed. Yeah. So we just tried to get east as fast as possible. And I think we actually were probably within a half mile to a mile of the tornado, but we couldn't see anything because we were behind the RFD.
Yeah.
So that sucked.
Yeah.
And then Pumpkin Center happened shortly after that. And so I think we drove for like 9 hours that day trying to get from thing to thing. And it was just one of those, we didn't trust our forecast and it did not pay out
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were not many people that cashed out on that Lyman, Lyman stuff. But those that did, I remember looking at the videos and I was like,
yeah,
well,
I know.
You win some, you lose some.
Never underestimate the Palmer on a day like that.
Yeah, and this was my first season chasing Colorado too, so it's like it was a whole learning experience within itself. I mean, I started chasing in 2016 in New England, which is the worst place in the country to start chasing, or maybe not the worst, but it taught me a lot in terms of learning how to navigate and anticipate terrain and stuff like that. But, nothing can prepare you for 40 knot storm motions and no road options.
Yeah, no, God bless everyone who chases in the East, period. I mean, Southeast all the way to Northeast. Yeah. It's funny because I think a lot of people kind of complain about Colorado because it's quirky, but having learned to chase here just meant that part of my education was learning about lift and terrain-induced lift and, areas like the Palmer or areas like the DCVZ, or, where just there are times sometimes where I'll see a little storm pop in the foothills near me and just head east because it's heading into the DCVZ and I know it's got the right surface obs and something's going to happen. So I'll just like tootle out there and wait. But I think it does take having that kind of like locational, it either takes practice if you're not from here or having that kind of locational knowledge where you start to develop pattern recognition over time.
That's for sure. It's just amazing to me just how much terrain can influence an atmosphere like that, because you have these storms that are shooting thousands and thousands of feet up, and just the fact that these mountains that may seem large on the surface are nothing in comparison to the actual dynamic that is the atmosphere, but yet it still has such a crazy factor, and you can reliably kind of use terrain features to kind of anticipate what might happen.
You can, and then there's and Wyoming is equally guilty of this. There were several days this year where a supercell would just suddenly form out, near Lyman or something, and we'd all be sitting here, on the Front Range watching it, because it didn't show up in models. The surface obs weren't right. Dews were in the low 40s, high 30s. And they'll just pop and do their thing. And if somebody can get out there fast enough, awesome. But anytime between March and November is fair game for random stuff.
Yeah.
I would say. So that did happen. There was one this year where I felt like all of us were on Twitter going, what the hell?
Yeah.
How did this even happen?
Yeah. Yeah. It's stuff like that can keep you pretty humble. In terms of forecasting and chasing. Shifting gears a little bit, I want to get into Girls Who Chase, and right off the bat, what was the initial fuel that kind of started this endeavor?
Oh man, how much time do you have? Because I worked in my career until very recently was in the sciences, mostly. Mm-hmm. Sciences, a little bit of engineering, sustainability, and the sciences is known for having a culture that is somewhat unequal when it comes to gender, and somewhat related to age, I would say, as well. It tends to reward, PhDs, people who've published a lot, and I'm going to say this kind of tongue in cheek, but older white guys tend to do really well. And then it's a bit of a spectrum for the rest of us. And because I was in communications, on the communication side, and did not have a PhD, I was almost another rung down, where I spent a lot of time justifying my existence in the first place, and justifying the need for effective communication and the like. So because of that, I have to say I came into chasing kind of pre-triggered, if that makes sense, because there's a STEM component to chasing, and a lot of folks are in meteorology. I think my assumption was that culturally it would probably be very similar, and that felt equally familiar and moderately irritating at the same time. But because I'm in communication, when I first came into the chase community and was participating on Twitter, I spent a lot of time watching how people interacted and seeing who was out there, and what kind of resources I could learn from, because for me, this is a lifelong learning process. And I noticed that there was a strangely disproportionate ratio of women to men when it came to at least who was active in the Twitter community and who was active on the chasing social media areas. And so that kind of furthered my assumption, as it were, that we were in a similar kind of cultural scenario that I had experienced previously. And that was sort of capped by when you look at the spectrum of media coverage, so television shows about chasing, media coverage of chasers, etc., it's also disproportionate. So when you look at Twister, for example, Jo is the only female character really in any of these shows. Any of the rest of them, there were occasionally women, but they often were portrayed as kind of token, somebody's wife or somebody's daughter who was there because the male character was the chaser, for example. At least that was how it came off to me. I know now, obviously, that was not necessarily the case. Right. And I also made chasing friends and chased with male chasers, and was also noticing that purchased footage, photographs getting shared, etc., were getting some disproportionate amounts of interest and coverage as well. And we did a few little anecdotal science experiments, trying to post different ways, one person posting, the other not. And in general, what we found was, if it was me standing next to a dude taking the same storm, same footage, the dude would inevitably sell and I would not. And some of that can certainly be chalked up to my stuff was crap. There is that, right? You have to factor in like quality of footage. But when it's happening repeatedly over years and you know that your work is improving and you're equally as capable of selling footage, what is happening here? Like something is afoot. And so I kind of started to dig into this a little bit more and realized first that the issue here isn't the same in the sciences. So in the sciences, this discrimination is being perpetuated by the people it benefits most, which is old white guys. That's why they like it that way. That's why it's hard to change. In chasing, actually, my theory is now, after 4 years of looking at this, that it's being perpetuated by media and cultural expectations. And it's kind of a vicious cycle that continues to recycle, where people see men chasing in the media, they expect men chasing in the media wants to do what people expect, so they cover men chasing in the media. And, at no point has anyone said, this is a little strange here.
Yeah.
And in fact, some of my biggest supporters and cheerleaders of women in chasing have been male chasers. So we do definitely, in my opinion, have a different scenario here. So all of this sort of led to, I would say, especially over the last 2 years, I would get upset on a regular basis. And like, why is this happening? This isn't fair. Like maybe I should quit. And somebody would say to me, don't quit. This is your love, and do something about it. Like, you're the one. And I would say, no, I just started chasing. I'm really new to the community. I don't feel like I've earned my dues yet. And then a few months would go by and it would happen again, and I would get upset. And over those periods of time, I would talk with other female chasers who reflected similar experiences. And so the data really started to mount to a point where it was really starting to get hard to ignore. And then there would be these, somebody would initiate, let's recognize all the female storm chasers and wonderful photographers on Twitter. And there'd be this like great kind of kumbaya about women in chasing, and everyone would rah. And then because it's Twitter, it would disappear 12 hours later or 2 hours later, because that's how, and some people would never see it. And ultimately, it always felt very limited to the sphere of, the bubble of people that followed us on Twitter, right? Mm-hmm. How do you break through that? So I can't turn off my communication cap, and, started thinking about like, okay, how do we change this? Like, how do we rewrite this model a little bit? Because we all know it's a problem. Everybody's a little frustrated. The community itself knows this is an issue and supports change. So how do we collectively as a community change the scenario itself and send a message to a broader audience that, women can certainly chase and do, and B, if there are little girls out there looking at this and looking for models in STEM or meteorology or the sciences, that they see something like this and say, instead of saying, well, I don't see anyone who looks like me, say, sweet, like I want to be like them when I grow up. You know, how do I get into this? And so eventually I started to think about, okay, how do we create something that does that for us and that can kind of be a collective platform for all female chasers to share their work, be recognized, and send that bigger message. And that's how Girls Who Chase was born. So it took finally one more event of me getting pissed off, I think, in late July. And I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm doing this. And so it started with Instagram, which is kind of hilarious because I actually hate Instagram for a lot of reasons. Yeah. But the thing Instagram has that no other social media does is it's an aggregator of content. So if we're going to sit over here and make the point that we have all of these amazing female photographers and content creators and amazing female chasers, and there's no home for that because it disappears, right? Or you have to go to every person's individual social media or website or whatever to see their work, then we're really not making a point at all. Right. It's too fragmented. So So I created the page on Instagram thinking I have no idea what I'm doing and we'll just see what happens. And it has taken off in kind of unprecedented ways. And the energy behind it from both female chasers and everyone else, male chasers, non-chasers, teachers, mothers, parents, random strangers who appreciate good photography. I mean, the feedback that we're getting continues to increase in scale, scope, and frequency. Things like, a middle school teacher who messaged and said, I'm showing this to my 6th grade students because I think it's critically important that, right, like I want them to learn about science, and storms are a great way to learn about weather and climate. But I also want to show them that anyone can do this, right? That chasing is for everyone. So it's, and then in addition to that, I think the other thing that's shocked me the most is we're starting to get photo submissions from photographers worldwide, like Australia, awesome. Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Czech Republic, Croatia. I mean, it almost seems like almost daily lately we're getting tagged in a new photographer's portfolio. And it's just so amazingly cool to be able to highlight this work that is so much bigger than me and any one of us. And so it feels like, in a lot of ways that it just needed a platform. It needed a home. And I'm the creator, but I am not the owner. Like it's designed to elevate everyone. And I've also flipped the Instagram model on its head. Instagram is like all about, the reason I don't like it is because it's all about likes and engagement and followers. And so you get these big photography aggregator pages that are all about getting likes and post only the really big storm photography photos so they can get more followers. And they paste their moderators' names all over the page and thank themselves profusely for benevolently, boosting photographers. And I just thought that was obnoxious. And so the way that our page is designed is, I'm on there as a moderator, but my name is nowhere on the photo. Like the caption is straight to the photographer. The features, like the stories and features, go straight to the photographer. So the notion is if someone sees a photo and likes it, they'll get pointed to the person, and then the person benefits from the feature, which is, in my opinion, how it should be.
For sure.
So that's phase 1. Phase two actually is we're about to start video and audio interviews. I start recording actually later tonight. And the reason for that is if our assumption is that female chasers aren't getting as much media coverage as male chasers, we're going to create our own.
Yeah.
Right? And get some more voices out there and talk about this a little bit. And I actually have just started speaking with a few different weather news channels and reporters pitching women in chasing and girls who chase, and have gotten some bites. So that's the next step.
That's incredible. Yeah. And it's amazing to see. I think the progression, like, as you said, and even within this past month, like, I was just looking at the page today just to see how much it's blown up, and it's incredible. And frankly, I think there needs to be even more like this, because I went to an engineering school, and like we were saying earlier about STEM, it's heavily male-dominated field, but at my university, it has a higher female to male ratio. So our School of Engineering was almost 50-50. So we have Society of Women Engineers at our school. Shout out to SWE at Quinnipiac.
That's amazing.
I know some of you are listening to this. So yeah, and I got to go to some of their events where they were doing a lot of like community outreach and stuff like that, going to schools and promoting STEM fields. And it was awesome to see just the engagement between young females in classrooms, and, you know, seeing female role models essentially, and being able to be like, okay, this is something that I can do. Granted, engineering, storm chasing, not entirely the same thing, but frankly, it's the same concept, being these STEM oriented fields where, you know, there has been this shift, but we just need to keep moving that, you know, keep pushing that boulder in that right direction, to kind of break these barriers that have kind of, you know, been systematically put in place almost.
Well, and it's a little bit self-perpetuating, because it really does take someone in any of these areas to step up and say, we need better representation, and it's going to start with me. And it could be a woman in engineering, or you know, a climate scientist, or in any one of these arenas. And then 3 other women see that one woman, and they become 4 women. And then, and the ripple effect continues to grow. I mean, that's why I felt so confident in doing something like this when I finally did make the move, because I had been watching this cultural phenomenon in my career for the last 17 years. And right. I also watched the women who were standing up and doing that getting mistreated and flattened and exhausted. And so what that takes is just more. And then you get the 6-year-old girl who isn't quite sure what she wants to do, but thinks putting stuff together is really cool. And she sees a woman in engineering on television or wherever she sees it, and that's, your job is done.
Yep. It's yeah, I think. And the other thing is too, is that, you know, I think there's this idea of, I'm going to use the example of Melanie Metz, who is by far the best storm chaser the past 2 seasons, I'd say. I think there's nobody that has seen more tornadoes than her in the past 2 seasons.
Goat.
And yeah, seriously. And I'll go out a limb and say that she is without a doubt the best storm chaser right now in the country, or even the world probably, given the frequency of tornadoes in the United States. But and I feel as though that there shouldn't be that need to put the label female chaser in front of that. She's simply the best chaser right now, I think.
Agree.
And, you know, I think we should be kind of almost, you know, elevating the platform for female chasers, but also not only just attaching that female label, but just saying chasers, and, you know, making this community more whole in general.
I think we'll know. I think there's a tipping point with
Yep.
that where you have to make your point and make your point and make your point and repeat yourself and show, don't tell, and right. And then over time, instead of hearing, wow, she saw that many tornadoes and she's a woman, you'll hear, holy crap, what an amazing chaser. And then you'll know that your job is done.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is like, that's the direction we want to be at. But I think even the progress that has been made within like the past year, especially with this movement from Girls Who Chase, we're starting to, definitely get the momentum going to get to that point. But yet, there's still a lot of work to get to where we need to be.
Agree. Yeah. And honestly, too, I think we've had some interest from meteorologists, and I could definitely see Girls Who Chase expanding into a much broader, I mean, the sky's the limit with something like this. And I never really put too much of a structure or a plan to it when I started. And I've kind of maintained that flow because I'm not exactly sure where it's most needed and what its future is and what makes the most sense. And I also don't want to be the only person making those decisions. So, yeah. So I'm not sure what's going to happen here, but I think we're on to something in terms of, this was for a lot of reasons. And some of it is women in STEM, but some of it is that chasing is kind of badass. And right, like there's a danger component to it. It takes having nerves of steel in some cases. It takes a lot of learning and understanding, and it's not for everyone. And so part of the reason that we designed the brand the way we did, and it's funny because somebody actually just the other day mentioned that it reminded them of Wonder Woman. And Wonder Woman was exactly the look and feel that we were going for when we built the brand. And it's this model of a woman who is strong, courageous, has a strong sense of justice, like all of these values that we want to emulate for others and instill in young women. And so it's called Girls Who Chase, but its purpose is so much grander than that. And that's why, it's hard to say what its future is going to be because it may change over time because there's a lot going on.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, in particular, like female meteorologists, female TV meteorologists in particular, that, you see some of the stuff that, they receive, and it's some of the nastiest stuff that, I can't imagine actually being in that position and being like in a, such a public view and have, someone that went out of their way to send something like that, which is just downright, A, disgusting, and B, just demeaning. And the fact that we have to, in 2021, have these kind of conversations about that kind of stuff is somewhat ridiculous. But I think, the more of a reach that a platform like Girls Who Chase can have, the more that we can address those types of heinous issues.
Agree. Yeah. And I mean, that's another reason why we're looking at a lot of different venues for this kind of content, because we want to go well beyond the sphere of just the chase community and people who think chasing is cool. And I, it's crossed my desk a couple of times, issues with female meteorologists and stuff like that. And I am in no way qualified to address that. Like I'm like any other woman, right? I am not a lawyer. I'm not a gender lawyer. I'm not. So, but if somebody wants to, on behalf, or there's another way to take this on, send me a note. I mean, like, that's the thing. It's sky's the limit in terms of what we take on here. But yeah, I mean, that happens a lot. it also happens with women in general. I mean, I've gotten my fair share, and I know several other female chasers have as well. So, and that's just women everywhere to a large degree. As soon as you put yourself in the public eye, unfortunately, you are risking judgment and people who feel entitled to pass judgment. And that's been an issue with women for as long as history has dictated.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think the more that, not only Girls Who Chase, but, there's a lot of these conversations that are being had now, fortunately. And I think just the idea of bringing it to light is already a step forward, whereas maybe even, 15, 20 years ago, that may not have been the case. Maybe that's just because of the fact of where social media is nowadays. But I think we've reached like this enlightenment stage where we can start, really addressing these conversations and in the broader picture, I guess you could say.
I hope so. And I think a big part of it too is, part of the reason that the chase community is such a fascinating model for me is because in a lot of ways, this has felt like a collective effort. And that's really what it's going to take. So it can't just be female chasers or me or whoever standing up there and saying, hey, we need to pay attention to this, right? It's equally as important that male chasers are saying that male, weather broadcasters are saying that everyone who is a part of this community is contributing in a lot of different ways. And to that point, one of the recordings that I am currently strategizing, it's probably going to be 2 sessions because this is a complex topic, is actually going to be with male chasers, talking about how do you operationalize supporting women? Like, what does that actually look like? Because I think we have a lot of folks who really would love to and have no idea what that means, or what does it mean for them? How do they do something, because they can't always be there when the statistics are taking place. And that's not the idea anyway. So it's more like, how do we as a collective begin to make this shift? How do we do it in our speaking? How do we elevate each other equally? All of those kinds of things.
Yeah. I think we're definitely, fortunately, moving in the right direction. And I want to ask, where is the best place that people out there that are listening to this right now can find Girls Who Chase? I know that you mentioned that you're on Instagram, and with these other avenues that are forthcoming, where are the future medias that are going to be representing Girls Who Chase going to be held at?
Sure. So right now, the main platform is on Instagram under Girls Who Chase. That's the handle. The bio has a link tree that has updated links to all of the other social media that we will be on as we're expanding. So there is a YouTube account under Girls Who Chase, but it's completely empty right now. But you're welcome. We'd love for you to subscribe. So when we do post things, and as I start recording, we'll be posting both video clips and audio podcasts. And the podcasts will be available in all your typical streaming locations. The video clips will be on Instagram and on YouTube. And it'll be kind of a big announcement when those recordings start getting released. So I'd keep an eye out for that. But I think Instagram right now is the best way to find us. We do actually also have girlswhochase.com, which may eventually expand into housing all of the podcast episodes and the like. Right now, it just directs to Instagram because there's nothing else. But as we expand, either one of those will be the place to find us.
Yeah. This is definitely an exciting transitional period for Girls Who Chase. And as the creator, and I should say probably maybe curator is the better title as of now.
I like it.
Definitely worth, promoting from all aspects because I strongly support the movement. And I think as a male in this community that we should be having these tough conversations and moving in the direction of promoting female chasers to the point where we can all just be a chaser community.
Well, and to that end, thank you for hosting me and starting this conversation. Hopefully these will continue in a variety of different arenas, but many thanks to you and June 1st for this.
Oh, thank you very much. I want to thank you, of course, for coming on and sharing all the exciting things that are going to be taking place. And I'm sure there will be plenty of stuff that we'll be retweeting from our end and trying to support the movement as best as possible.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm sure we'll see you under a mezzo soon.
Yeah, I'm can't wait for spring.
Right.
This time change has already got me somewhat messed up and itching to be out on the open plains again. So
you and me both.
All right. Thank you so much, Jen. And thank you for tuning in to the June 1st podcast. See ya.